Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Hospital. After reporting the thugs to Maruko and being scolded by her, Izuku's remaining time under her tutelage was spent training and comforting Eri. The little unicorn girl was slowly opening up to them and getting used to the presence of others, to the point where she even saw Izuku's and Maruko as family, almost with her calling Yuzuku her big brother and Maruko her rabbit mom. Izuku was just glad she didn't call him father or papa. As adorable as that would have been, it would have been awkward to hear Eri calling them her parents. If the press heard that, there'd be no stopping them or Maruko, as she's likely want to kill then. Eventually, Izuku told his mom about Eri, and she immediately showed up with apple pie, as they had earlier discovered that Eri loved apples, to the point where her eyes light up at just the thought of them. However, a problem emerged once Eri was healthy enough to leave the hospital. She had no known living family, and she seemed completely unwilling to let Izuku or Maruko leave her life. She'd grown emotionally dependent on them. Maruko couldn't take her since she had a job as full-time pro hero, and her apartment wasn't built for two, which left Yuzuku, but he was busy attending UA, and his mother worked as a nurse. They obviously couldn't put her up for adoption due to her trauma and emotional dependency on Izuku and Maruko. So, they had problem. A problem mitigated by an act of kindness. I'll just adopt her. Inko states, kindly confusing the others. But mom, you work at a different hospital, and I attend UA. How are we going to care for her? Izuku asked. I'll just apply for a job at UA then. You're always telling me how overworked recovery girl looks when you visit her with your friends after training. I figured I could work there and bring Eri with me, killing two birds with one stone. Inko replied kindly. I guess it's a good idea, but still. Izuku replied, awkwardly not knowing how to phrase his retort. You afraid your mom's gonna tell your friends embarrassing stories about your childhood? Maruko interjected. Yes. Exactly that. Izuku stated firmly as Eri looked at him with her big, adorable golden eyes. What does adoption mean, big brother Izu? She asked as only a child could as she tugged at his heartstrings. It means you would legally be my little sister Eri, but only if you want it. He replies, already knowing the answer. Really? You would be my big brother for real? She asked innocently. Yes, Eri, I would be your real big brother. He replied with a gentle smile. Yes, I want that. She replied, sounding slightly desperate, as if he would leave if she didn't agree. He'd have to work on that. How could he say no to her? Or that smile? Okay, I'll ask Nizu to consider hiring you, mom, and I'll even ask if Eri can attend some classes with me. He states, causing his mom to hug him along with Eri. Aw, ain't that adorable? Welp, I'm off then. Maruko states as she rises to leave. Oh, I'll also ask if Nizu wants a new hero teacher. Izuku quickly adds with a smug smile. Yes, sure, wait, what? Maruko replies. Nizu's office. After having lunch, Izuku went to UA after phoning Nizu and setting up a meeting with him to explain just about everything. The meeting was a little intense, as Eraserhead also decided to join it, saying he wanted to hear what his favorite problem child was up to. Izuku explained how Eri was emotionally dependent on him and Maruko, how she needed quirk training to overcome her fear, and that his mom would like a job at UA as a nurse. You've made an interesting series of requests to me, young Midoriya. Nizu states, having heard his student out. I know it's a lot to ask, sir, but I promise this worry impede my studies or my training. I don't want to abandon a traumatized little girl to the wolves is all. Izuku replies, hopeful his requests will be granted. Nizu looked at Eraser and Eraser looked at Nizu. They then both looked at Yuzuku simultaneously. All right, problem child, we've agreed to your requests, but this had better not interfere with your studies or training. Eraser states calmly. Really? Thank you very much, sirs. I won't make you regret this. Izuku states, bowing in gratitude. One thing though, do you know what this girl's quirk is? Eraser asks. Unfortunately not, sir. Whenever we asked Eri about it, she'd go quiet, and whenever it activated, she could freak out and tell us to get away from her. I suspect it may be dangerous or difficult to control, which is why I'm glad you're here, as I would also like to request you help me help her to learn to control it better. Izuku replies, causing Eraser to groan. Friggin' problem child, alright, I'll help out. He replied after muttering something. Thank you very much, sir. Izuku replies, bowing again. Now that business is out of the way, Let's move on to new business like the formal complaint I received from Sir Naitai about you and Maruko quote, ruining 3 years of investigations and unwarranted assault. Can you please explain? Nizu explains as he shows Izuku the email containing the complaint. I'll do my best. Izuku replies before explaining all he knew, which in this case wasn't much. He explained how they'd saved Eri from a madman who turned out to be a Yakuza boss, that Naitai was basically accosting Eri when they saw him, and that Maruko was the one to punch Naitai in the face because of how he was treating the young girl. I see him. Thank you very much for your input, young Midoriya. You may leave now, and remember to be on time tomorrow. Nizu states Don Izuku to bow once again and start leaving, but suddenly turned on his heels. Sir, what about that other thing I told you about? Izuku asked vaguely. I'm on top of it, young Midoriya. Don't you worry. The dean replied just as vaguely as Izuku left the office. What was that all about? Eraser asked. Nizu was about to reply, only for Eraser to interrupt him. You know what? I don't want to know. I'm exhausted and I'm late for training with Toki, he states before also leaving the office. Nizu then looks at his personal computer and chuckles. You've certainly hidden your tracks well, Endeavor, but not well enough. Nizu states as he begins to laugh like a supervillain would. The next day, after getting back to the hospital, Izuku and his mother, along with Eri, sat through the exhaustively long yet surprisingly easy adoption process for Eri. By the end of it, Izuku understood why the child adoption service had its stellar reputation. Seriously, all they did was answer a few easy questions and sign a few things. No in-depth background checks or anything extensive. But anyway, that night Eri slept in Izuku's bed whilst he took the floor in the guest futon. But he was sure she couldn't be let alone right now. She practically cried when he showed her what a bed was, and he immediately hugged her gently and let her get it out of her system. By the morning, however, it would transpire that Eri had snuck into Izuku's futon during the night and was curled up in ball hoping his pajama top like a lifeline. When she woke up, she looked startled at the location she found herself and cried again, muttering about how it wasn't all a dream. Izuku gave her another hug because of that. Afterwards, they both got up and Eri proceeded to mimic Izuku's morning routine, from his morning stretches to how he brushed his teeth. Seeing as they had no clothes for a girl, her Izuku gave her some of his old clothes that fit her, which is how she ended up wearing a t-shirt that said doorframe on it with a pair of jeans and all-might boots. Following that, they went downstairs and found Inko, who upon seeing Eri made a mental note to buy her some actual clothes, already making a traditional Taishika breakfast for them. After years of limited eating and a week of hospital food, Eri was stunned by the meal's utter deliciousness and fervently thanked Inko as she cried again. Inko hugged her that time and even gave her horn a little kiss. Today, Izuku would be taking Eri to lectures with him, as Inko still needed to be interviewed by the university before being hired. He preemptively sent his classmates a message informing them of Eri's existence and that he'd be arriving with her and that they needed to be on their absolute best behavior, even singling Armina and Mineta due to their energetic behavior and perverse natures respectively. 1A homeroom. When Izuku arrived, he was thankfully not immediately accosted by his classmates asking to see Eri or ask him about either stain or overhaul. However, he did see that Mina looked as though she was about to burst with excitement, though he couldn't blame her seeing how cute Eri was. Eventually, someone did rise and approach him. Thankfully, it was the ever level-headed Shoji. Hey there, Midoriya. Your message said something about a little girl named Eri. Can we see her? The gentle giant asked kindly. Sure, just give it a minute. She's shy. Izuku replies as he knelt down and spoke to someone just beyond the doorframe. It's all right, Eri. They're really nice and cool. I pinky promise. Izuku stated as he coaxed Eri into entering the classroom. Hello, I'm Eri. Eri quietly stated as she hid behind Izuku's leg. Oh my god, she's so cute, was the thought of all the girls and half the guys. Now, I know you guys are all excited about her, but please be patient. She's been through the ringer. Izuku's explained as her picked her up. Eri then looked at the full class, but saw someone who petrified her, Tokoyami. She curled into Izuku's chest, began shaking with fear, and he immediately recognized why. SHD. I forgot about Tokoyami. That madman, Overhaul, had a bird-like mask on. I should have known this would have happened. Izuku mentally panicked. Tokoyami, you wouldn't happen to have any apples on hand, would you? Izuku asked hopefully. He'd seen the emo earring them consistently at lunchtime and hoped he'd have some on him. Thankfully, he was in luck, as not only did he have an apple on him, but a box of homemade apple frittatas his mom apparently made for him. "Here, little one. Would you like a taste?" Tokoyami asked Eri as he slowly approached to appear as non-threatening as possible, as he too had seen the effect his appearance had on the youngling. Eri slowly, and with some coaching from Izuku, tinted around to see the bird-headed young man offer her something that looked delicious and smelled familiar. She cautiously reached out to take it, whilst also holding on to her new big brother just in case. Tokoyami made no attempt to stop her, and she ate the frittata. "It was very nice. Thank you," Eri states as Izuku wipes a few crumbs for her mouth. After that whole debacle, the class finally settled down to wait for Eraser, who was running late. To pass the time, they all decided to share stories of their internships. As they began, Izuku sat Eri down in a little desk next to his, which was made for her, and gave Eri some coloring books and crayons to distract her for the moment. Most of the stories boiled down to "we trained" and/or "we patrolled," as well as "we fought some thugs," but there were a few interesting ones worthy of note. For instance, Sue helped the hero Selkie stop on offshore's weapons deal headed by a dangerous villain named Innsmout, who had a dangerous reputation as well as a body count. Thanks to Tsu's blunt method of speaking, they got a significant number of details about into only the mission, but about other things she did, like hang out with Selkie's crew as well as debarnacle the ship. But Tsu wasn't the only one with things to share. Yamamo, for instance, was practically bouncing out of her seat top, tell her from ins about her time with Fat Gum. Apparently, she'd introduced to many local delicacies, which just turned out to be snack foods they'd all eat about 100 times, but Momo was so happy just talking about them that the class silently agreed to just let her continue without interrupting. Moving on, Mineta surprisingly had a decent story to tell about his time with the bouncing hero, Ricochet. The hero, whose quirk let them rebound kinetic energy, actually helped out Mineta a lot in how to use his ball for mobility in combat, and he used that new skill to actually help some people. But that wasn't the only thing he talked about. He also thanked Midoriya for moving him away from MT Lady, as he'd heard from Tsuburaba in 1B, who had taken the internship with her, that all he learned was how to do chores. Up next was Kirishima, and both did he hype up his internship under Fourth Kind alongside Tetsu from 1B. However, all he actually needed up doing was community service and basic training. With the way Kirishima spoke, you'd think he helped save the Prime Minister or something. The stories all continued on as normal until they two at Izuku, and oh boy did they have some questions to ask him. They'd actually all seen the fights between him and Overhaul due to a civilian filming it and posting it online, as well as the Stain fight on the news, but the class wanted answers to a few burning questions, such as, who was that guy you fought who made spikes? Mina asked, what happened in Hosu? Why were Noma there? Kaminari asked, how large are Maruko's thighs? Mineta asked, how did you end up fighting Stain? Yururika asked, why did that bird-masked guy call quirks diseases? Yamamo asked. Izuku did his best to answer. Guys, one at a time please. Izuku begged as his classmates invaded his personal space with each question. Now, to go and order a Yakuza boss called Overhaul. The League is suspected to have attacked. 54.6 centimeters, she bragged. It was bad luck. And he was completely insane. Izuku replied as best he could, calming his classmates. Wait, hold on. What did that Overhaul guy want with Eri? Jiro asked. Izuku looked over to check on Eri before answering. She was obliviously coloring in a picture of a butterfly. Honestly, Jiro, I've got no idea. He called her a cure for quirks or something, but he was clearly mental. As of right now, I don't even know what her quirk does. Also, even if I did know, I probably couldn't tell you anything significant. Izuku explained to its classmates. After that, homeroom continued as usual with Aizawa finally showing up. He welcomed them back, then took roll call, sternly threatened Ida for his actions in Hosu, and immediately went to sleep. Slightly disappointed at Eraser, the students just decided to keep taking about their internships. However, they hit a bump when Eri finished her coloring in. Is this good, big brother Aizu? She asked quietly, but the class heard it and couldn't help but dawn over the adorable little girl. It's appealing, Eri. I'm proud of you. He replied as she blushed bashfully, not used to being praised, causing the class to love her even more. Beta Field. After discussing their varied internships and fawning over Eri, the class all left for lectures. Until later that day when in heroics class they got another visit from All Might, who brought them all to Beta Field to participate in a very important exercise, a race. All Might explained that they would be separated into 5 groups of 4 and would them race one another through the mock industrial complex to save a civilian, a role which he himself would be playing. Before they split up, however, Izuku had to take care of Eri. Eri, in a moment, I'm going to be performing a training exercise, which means I'll have to leave you with my friends for a while. Is that okay? He asked her. But why? She asked fearfully, not wanting her brother to leave her alone. Because I need to learn how to be a hero. He replied truthfully. But you're already my hero. She replied, innocently tugging at his heartstrings as the entire room along with All Might had their hearts melted. That may be true, Eri, but I'm not an official hero yet. Izuku replies, trying not to cry joyfully at her calling him a hero. They were then approached by the ever-gentle Shoji. If it helps, she can sit on my shoulder while she waits when it's your turn. The gentle giant offered kindly. Eri then just looked at Izuku, as of asking for approval. I pinky promise it'll be okay, Eri. Izuku states, offering his pinky, causing Eri to take it with her own. Okay, big brother, I'll be brave. She replies shakily as she lets Shoji put her on his shoulder. After that, the teams were selected and split up through a randomizer. The first group consisted of Sato, Shoji, Yamamo, Aoyama, and Ishido. The second group consisted of Yururika, Kirishima, Hagakure, Ojiro, and Mineta. The third group consisted of Toki, Kota, Kaminari, Shiro, and Ida. The fourth and final group consisted of Midoriya, Todoroki, Azui, Tokoyami, and Jiro. The first race was a confusing one, seeing as none of the participants had much in the ways of augmenting their speed. Though there were some bets on Momo just creating a jetpack, though that unfortunately didn't happen. During the race, she did, however, create a grappling hook gun to temporarily get ahead of everyone, but surprisingly enough, it was Sato who won after doing was canister of what looked to be brown sugar. According to his testimony afterward, he's taken Midoriya's advice to look into how different types of sugar affected his quirk, and it used out that brown sugar augmented his speed, white sugar augmented his strength, and cane sugar upped his stamina. After him came Momo using her grappling hook. Then came Mina using her acid to slide around, and created footholds in the sides of buildings to climb them. Then came Aoyama using his laser to propel himself around and up the buildings, occasionally smacking into them. And lastly came Shoji, who was just on foot. Up next, the second group had a surefire winning bet in Yururika, and they were right to believe so. Whilst she was rather slow, her ability to float across the city made eating to All Might's location easily enough. After her came Mineta, who had used a series of ball clusters to bounce himself across the mock city. He was followed by Ojiro, then Hagakure, and then Kirishima, who were all on foot. The third group was very interesting, as all the bets went to either Ida or Shiro due to their enhanced mobility options. But surprisingly enough, the individual who won was Toki. She had combined her water streams into a thin surfboard and literally surfed through the air to All Might's position while showing off her new costume. It looked like a modified set of scuba gear with a black and turquoise blue color scheme that was plated with Kevlar over her more vital areas. She also wore a breathing apparatus and goggles, as well as tubes that wrapped around her arms and were meant to be filled with water. After her surprising victory, Toki was followed by Shiro swinging through the city, followed by Ida on foot post-haste. Then came Kaminari, also on foot, but lot faster than usual. And lastly was the quiet Kota. Finally, the fourth group was a foregone conclusion. Whilst Todoroki and Tokoyami had powerful abilities, and Tsu had significant mobility, but everyone knew how things would end up, and lo and behold they did. Izuku, with his incredible speed and agility, raced to All Might's position in less than a minute, swinging through the industrial complex like a monkey with 360-degree vision. He was then followed up by Tokoyami, who, swear to God, flew through the air using Darl Shadow. He was then followed by Tsu, then Todoroki, and finally Jiro. Yagi's office. After the race course was completed, and a small incident in the locker rooms involving a hole, Izuku was called to Yagi's office. So he dropped Eri off with his mom and went to office. He knew exactly what Yagi wanted and brought his notebook to aid in their selection process. So have you made list of potential candidates? Izuku asked Yagi as they both sat down. Indeed I have. Yagi replies as he handed over the list. The list had names from both 1A and 1B including, but not limited to, Kirishima, Ida, Yururika, Yaoyorozu, Kindu, and Hananuki. I chose these specific students based on a criteria of their selfless nature, willpower, and determination. Yagi explained as Izuku looked at the short list. Did you ever think of asking any of the upperclassmen? Izuku asked. I had considered it, and one was pushed by an old friend of mine, but I believe it would be best to give it to a newer hero student, as to give them at least 3 years to learn how to incorporate the strengths and weaknesses of OFA, instead of giving them a year in which they may only scratch the surface. Yagi explained, remembering how despite being able to use most of OFA immediately upon obtaining it, it took him nearly the 3 years just to reduce his strength to a non-lethal level. That makes sense. Best to give them as much time as possible to acclimate to their new strength, and not just taskmaster them through a single year. Izuku replied. With that said, let's get started. Izuku states as they being their considerations. First up, Kirishima. The conversation was over whether or not OFA would be an improvement to his hardening quirk. After all, something can only get so dense and hard before it breaks. Kirishima was certainly in the running due to his infinite positivity and willpower. However, his hard-headed attitude towards problem-solving held him back. Next up was Ida. This one was a hard sell due to his recent actions in Hosu, as whilst he wasn't there by choice, he still chose to fight for revenge. That, along with his narrow inside-the-box thinking and strict adherence to rules, made him undesirable, as they feared he'd just try and be all might. He was mainly put on the list to die to hard-working nature and exceptional intelligence and use of his quirk, but beyond that, his chances weren't good. Next was Yururika. Now she was an interesting 1TI debate, as Izuku had to put his bias aside to fairly judge his friend. But even then he still sung her praises, pointing how OFA could potentially evolve her anti-gravity to potential gravity manipulation, and along with her unyielding endurance and determined nature to never give up, along with her willingness to learn and adapt, meant that she was a shoo-in for being a successor, with her only downside currently being her over-reliance on her quirk. Next was Yaoyorozu. For her, Izuku was curious if OFA's energy supplies could make her creation ability unlimited, while Yagi saw in her as truly heroic person who could have easily lived off her parents' money and inherited their vast economic empire, but instead chose to become a hero to truly make a difference. Her only real weaknesses were her limited lipid supplies and self-doubt, which caused her think too much in situations that need split-second decision-making. She was a sting contender. Next up was Kindu. The simplicity of her quirk combined with her skill in martial arts made Yagi think she'd be perfect for the role of successor. He was fully aware of how simple his fighting style was, and that it mainly relied on raw force to overwhelm his opponents. But he believed that if Kindu combined it with her martial arts, she'd be unstoppable. Plus, her family had minor strength enhancers in it, so saying her quirk evolved would be an easy write-off or her newfound strength. That, along with her determination and ability to control roundly individuals, i.e. Monoma, made her a surefire pick. Finally, Hananuki. Lastly, Hananuki was chosen for his exceptional strategic abilities. The young man had gotten into UA on recommendation for that very reason. However, neither of them saw how OFA could truly improve his abilities unless her completely changed his battle strategy and style. He was one to consider, but not as strong as the others. The two of them deliberated all throughout lunchtime, debating over personalities, quirks, traits, and skills, until they finally came to a conclusion. Yagi's successor would be League Hideout. The recent days had been bad for Tamura. Firstly, his interaction with the legendary hero killer ended in disaster and anger. How dare that BSDRD call him convictionless? He had conviction to destroy. Then his plan to sow fear into the populace using a random Nomu attack to scare them went pear-shaped immediately, with all 3 dying in less than an hour. But the worst part came when that arrogant hero killer BSDRD condemned them on live TV and in front of the whole country at that. This ruined his plan to use the hero killer as a martyr to get new recruits, but now all he was getting was emo losers like the guy in front of him. The guy in question looked like he was held together by staples, gum, and a wish upon a star. He had black hair, blue dead eyes, a white t-shirt, a black duster coat, and a matching pair of black boots. He'd introduced himself as Dabi and said he'd heard of the League on TV, having decided to join after hearing that the League stood for absolute destruction. However, Tamura saw him as nothing but an emo loser with a petty axe to grind. But what choice did he have, seeing as no one else had shown up? That was until the bar received a knock at the door. Kurojiro, ever the polite one, answered only to have 8 men in bird masks burst through the door brandishing guns. "Is this the hideout of the League of Villains?" A man with white arrow-showed hair asked. "Who's asking, Birdface?" Tamura demanded as he got angry. "My name is Chronostasis, and I currently represent the Shai Hasaikai." The man replied, naming himself. "Shai Hasaikai? I know that name. Wait. Wasn't that the name of that overhaul guy's sect of the Yakuza?" Tamura asked, now somewhat interested. "Yeah, that's us." A man dressed in all black, looking like a traditional plague doctor. "Why are you guys here?" Tamura asked. "Revenge." Chronostasis replied coldly. "I don't remember screwing with you guys, so I doubt I'm your target." Tamura replied sarcastically. "Correct. See, we recently learned from a contact in the Hosu police that a young hero student named Izuku Midoriya alongside Maruko were the ones to arrest our boss and steal our property." Chrono explained as the men all took seats at the bar. Tamura and Chrono took a table for themselves as Kurojiro took drinks orders. "Yeah, I saw that. He's also the one who beat the hero killer." Tamura replied angrily as he wanted to be the one to snuff out Stain. "And if I'm not mistaken, he was also the one to best you at the USJ and kill your little bioweapon." Chrono replied, causing Tamura to pause. "That wasn't in any official report." "How could you know that?" he demanded. "We have our ways." Chrono replied as his drink was served, a scotch on the rocks. "So this brat has screwed both our organizations over. Where does that leave us?" Tamura asked. "It leaves us with 2 options. Either we let our organizations slowly die due to our setbacks," Chrono states as he takes a drink. "And option 2? Tamura asks. "We combine our forces to destroy him." Chrono elaborates as he gestures to one of the men at the bar to come forward. "If we do that, what can you Yakuza possibly offer other than mere manpower?" Tamura asks, knowing that numbers allows wouldn't be enough to kill the brat. Man who Chronostasis gestured to step forward, then handed him a small hermetically sealed case. "We can offer a solution to his impossible strength," Chrono states as he opens the case to reveal 8 red darts. 1A homeroom. A few weeks after internships ended, UA sent an email to all their students that they had a special announcement for them in their homerooms. "In 2 weeks, you'll all be taking your finals for this semester," Eraser blandly announced. The class was silent, only to then erupt in excitement, because finals meant just one thing. Summer camp vacation. Mina cried out as her friends crowded around her. "S'mores." Kaminari cries out. "Campfire stories." Zero adds. "Hot spring babes." Mineta interjects, completely ruining the moment as everyone looked at him. "What?" he asked trepidatiously. You ruined it. You ruined it." Mina replies as the class all retake their seats. After Aizawa explains that in 1 week, they'll need to not only hand in all their essays for other lectures, but prepare for not only a written exam, but a physical one as well. Upon his explanations, he went to sleep, leaving his students to their own devi. "I forgot to study, and I'm behind on 3 essays. Zero cries out in panic. "Same here, man." Kaminari adds as he begins to sweat. "How is that possible? You've been going to all the same lectures, and you should have been writing in your spare time." Todoroki absently states, unsure of how anyone could be failing. "Shut up, Richie Rich. Just because you don't have a social life to get in the way of study, doesn't we're all lone wolves." Mina snaps back as she too was significantly behind. He dummies." Mineta mutters. "What was that grapefruit?" Jiro asks as everyone looks at the smug student. "Oh, nothing. Just that I've already finished most of my work." He brags. "You traitor." Zero cries out. The group then began arguing with Mineta, so to silence them, Momo stepped forward. "If you guys would like, I could tutor you, as I am also finished with my essays." Momo offered kindly. "Thank you, Yamamoto." They all stayed in reply. "It's no trouble, really. In fact, if need be, you're all invited if you want." Momo tells the whole room. Nearly everyone agreed, the only exception being Todoroki. "Oh, I'm so excited. I've never had friends over." "Oh, what kind of tea do you all like? I'll need to tell the staff, and I'll need Ti clear the library." Momo replied as she began to make plans, but a few words caught the class off guard. "Staff, library, tea, Yayarosa household. When the class all arrived at Yamamo's house, they were all stunned. They'd assumed from both her name and her mannerisms that Momo was from a wealthy family, but this? The house was a gated mansion with a front garden half the size of football field. The gate had cameras and a voiced buzz-in box. There were guards patrolling the grounds with guns. When they entered, they were greeted by a platoon of butlers and maids who all politely took their coats and walked them to the house library, which was more like the Library of Alexandria. It was so huge. "You're all here. This is going to be so fun," Momo announced from the library's third floor. The class then all tools their seats and pulled out their books. Izuku, meanwhile, set Eri up with some more coloring books. He'd brought we since his mom was busy today with work and was still waiting to be hired at UA. But he felt that Eri was safe after seeing all the guards Yamamo's family had protecting the mansion. He could breathe easily as the staff brought tea and a large assortment of snacks. "Ah, this is going to be brilliant," Izuku thinks to himself as he sips some Earl Grey tea. UA, training grounds. During the week before finals, as many studies at Momo's house, others took the opportunity to prepare for the practical exam. We find ourselves in UA's state-of-the-art training gym, where through the best equipment money can buy, the students can improve themselves. But this was no ordinary gym. In order to push the limits of quirks, it was outfitted with advanced equipment such as a treadmill that could go to Mach 0.89, a bench press that had hydraulics to increase weight up to 500 tons, a rowing machine that could require up to 200 tons of force to pull, a punching machine that could withstand a 3-kiloton bomb's worth of kinetic energy, and dumbbells that could weigh up to 1,000 tons. Currently, the gym was half full with students from all classes as well as some from 1A, such as Toki, Kirishima, Shoji, Yururika, and of course Izuku. Other classmates were in specialized training rooms to improve and practice with their quirks. Some, like Toki and Izuku, were just talking about capabilities. "So how's your surfing experience been going?" Izuku asked curiously as he produced his hero almanac and from seemingly thin air. "It's actually going great. My instructor says I apparently have a natural talent for surfing," Toki replies. "That's great, Toki. Moving on. How about your constructs? How are those progressing?" Izuku asks. "Not great, actually. I just can't get them to solidify in any viable way. They just keep collapsing," she replied. "Have you tried thinking of your water at the molecular level, like visualization?" Izuku asked. "I've tried that, but I just end up with ice, and begged you ask, yes. I can manipulate ice the same way I can water, but I've yet to get any steam results." She replies, much to Izuku's excitement. "That's incredible, Toki. You're incredible," he states with a smile. "Thanks, dude, and thank you for helping me catch up to everyone else. Eraserhead was slave driver during my internship, but also unbelievably vague when it came helping with my quirks capabilities," Toki explains. "But still, for someone who got off to a late start, you're doing incredibly well. In fact, I dare say you're in the top 5 strongest in the class," Izuku complimented, causing Toki to blush. However, in his excitement, he accidentally bumped into someone with purple hair. "Hey, watch it," the purple-haired guy angrily states. "Oh, sorry, guy. I was caught up in my excitement and must have lost track of my spatial awareness. It won't happen again." Izuku apologized kindly as he offered a handshake to smooth things over. The guy just sneered at him and walked away, muttering something about luck and silver spoons. "What's his problem?" Izuku asked generally. "That's just Shinso, ignore him. He's too caught up in his own self-loathing to change," Toki states, catching Izuku's attention. "Shinso? Was he at your class?" he asked. "Yeah, but I don't know much about him other than his quirk and general attitude," she replied as Izuku's eyes light up at hearing about a new quirk. "Tell me everything," he requests, slightly invading her personal space. "From what I gathered, his quirk is called brainwashing, and whilst I don't know how it activates, I do know it's inescapable without help," she explained, much to Izuku's delight. "That's so useful for so many situations," he exclaimed as he furiously wrote down potential uses. "It would be at the guy it was attached to wasn't such a self-loathing but," she states, much to Izuku's confusion. "You've called him self-loathing twice now, why is that?" he asked suspiciously. "Because he hates his own quirk. From what I got from his mutterings and ramblings, a friend in middle school said his quirk was perfect for a villain, in a joking manner of course, but apparently he took it to heart and began to hate himself. That, and alongside his lack any real physical strength, is probably what led to him failing the hero entrance exam," she explained in detail. But there's no such thing as a villainous quirk or even a heroic quirk. Quirks are just tools and are defined by the user, not some categorized list. Izuku explains truthfully. Try telling him that, and all you'll get is an answer along the line of, how could ever understand? Or, you're just lucky to have been born with a hero's quirk, like people are somehow born good or evil. She explains as she mocks Shinso's tone of voice. No need to mock the guy, Toki. He's clearly trying his best. Izuku states, referring to Shinso, who was currently trying to weakly lift some easy weights. Should have tried his best out the gate instead of wasting tears of his life moping around. I mean, that's clearly what you did, being quirkless and all. I doubt you had many supporters until you showed how your efforts paid off. Toki states as she goes to the bathroom. Izuku just looked at Shinso as he thought about what would have happened if he hadn't been the reincarnation of Garou. Would he have wasted years of life moping, only giving lip service to his dreams of being a hero? Would he have accepted OFA from All Might? Questions that will forever remain unanswered, he guessed. Support department. It was 4 days until finals, and some students were on their way to the support department. Why? Because their costume alteration they'd requested a few weeks ago were finally finished. As they approached the door, Izuku's instincts warned him to stay back. He stretched out his arm to block his friends, and just before they could ask what was going on, the door to the lab was blasted off its hinges. Izuku senses that someone was in the explosion and so caught them midair. The victim, as it stands, turned out to also be the perpetrator, Mei Hatsum, which was revealed when Power Loader exited the room yelling at her. Mei, if I've told you once, I've told you a million times, nitroglycerin is not an appropriate gear lubricant. Power Loader shouted in abject fury. Yeah, yes, Super Mover, or whatever your name is, 10 million man. You're here at last. Mei replies only to immediately be distracted by the person carrying her. Hey Mei, your baby's ready for me and my friends? Izuku asked casually. After the sports festival, but just before internships, Izuku along with Momo, Yururika, Hagakure, Kaminari, and Ojiro had all put in orders for new equipment, which was now finally ready. Izuku had personally asked Mei, as she insisted he call her, to make his hero costume since despite her peculiar personality, she was a brilliant inventor. You got that right, 10 million man. She replied. However, she still refused to learn anyone's names, though he didn't mind the nickname and found it endearing. Perfect, let's get a move on then. Izuku states as he, still carrying Mei, re-enters the lab. Does he know how charming he is sometimes? Jiro asks the others. I think it's genetic. Yururika replies, remembering all the time Izuku was a gentleman. So freaking jealous. Kaminari mutters to himself. They all then entered the lab. Mei then jumped out of Izuku's arms and rushed towards an industrial wardrobe before opening it. First things first, Magic Melon's and Floaty's new DNA costumes. Mei states using her nicknames for Momo and Turu. Both costumes were skin-tight suits that covered everything except the hands, head, and feet. Momo's was red with beige accents, had a set of black combat boots with red stripes, twin arm bracers with flexible screens on each arm, and a red tinted visor. Turu's, meanwhile, was completely pearlescent from head to toe. It shone like a mirage, with its only visible addition being a small SWCH on a wristband. Both these costumes were made using your DNA from the hair you gave us. Magic Melon's yours should now let you use that valuable creation ability of yours without tearing, along with the new flexible screens and visor being a replacement for that spinal injury in waiting you call a dictionary. Whilst Floaties, your suit will remain visible until you flip that SWCH on the left wrist, which activates a current like a neuron activation, which should turn it invisible. Mei explains at half the speed of sound. The two heroines took the costumes to the changing rooms. Next up, Cheeks. Your costume is completely overhauled because the guy who made your old one did an atrocious job. Heels for fighting in, Bleg. That helmet served absolutely no purpose, and you had no why to reorient yourself. Which is why I've scrapped the heels in favor of lifts with springs in them. The helmet now fully closes and has a heads-up display, giving you a gyroscope to help with reorientation as well as grappling hooks in the wrists. Mei explained as she invaded Yururika's personal space and handed her the new suit. Yururika then entered the changing rooms. Next up, we have some weapons for Sparky and Tail. Mei states as she grabbed a box from the wardrobe. First up, we got Sparky's exoframe and Amp Bat. May states as she pulls out a contraption meant to fit over a human body, and what looked like cross between a baseball bat and a tuning fork. The exoframe will allow you externally charge your body to increase your strength and speed, as well as diffuse short-circuiting from your quirk. The amp bar is as it looks, a tuning fork you hit people with whilst charging it with electricity. Have fun, May explains before shoving the gear in Kaminari's face. Second to last, tail. Here's your tail armor with the mace on the end. She states, handing Ojiro the armored tail sleeve which looked to end in the tail of an ankylosaurus. And finally, my favorite patron, Mr. 10 Million Man. I've got to admit your request threw me a little bit seeing as you're quirkless, but I took it as a personal challenge to complete it. So here it is, your new battle garb. It's highly resistant to all forms of damage from kinetic to chemical, can regenerate, and is very comfortable. May explains as she hands Izuku what looked to be a copy of his old costume, but he could tell it was different. Thanks, May. I really appreciate you doing this for me and my friends. Izuku states, no problem, 10 Million Man. Just don't forget to tell everyone you meet about the next big company, Hatsum Incorporated. May replies enthusiastically as she smiles brightly. Just before he entered the changing rooms, however, he turned back to her. May, can you do something else for me? If it's not too much trouble? He requested, getting her attention. Private training room. After returning from the support lab, Izuku found himself in a private training room alongside Eri and Eraserhead, with Nizu in the observation room. Eri herself was surrounded by multiple objects, caged rodents, and plants to test her quirk's interaction with other items. Okay, Eri, remember, we just want you to try to use your quirk. Izuku states kindly as he looks his little sister in the eye. But what if I can't control it? I don't want you to disappear and make Mommy Inko hate me. Eri replied, fearfully, almost crying at the thought. Eri, neither myself or Mom could ever hate you, you're too cute. Besides, if you can't control your quirk, then Eraserhead can turn it off with his cool special eyes. Izuku explains as he gives Eri a hug and looks at Eraser, who gives a nod in turn. So you ready? He asked. Okay, I'll try. Eri replies as she takes a deep breath and clenches up to increase her focus. You sure this'll work? Eraser asks Izuku as they congregate to watch from a safe distance. You got a better idea? Izuku asks. Just putting my opinion out there. Eraser replies. SSH, something's happening. Izuku states, pointing at Eri. Her horn was glowing a golden HEW of energy with sparkles. The two of them watch intently see the effects of her quirk. Firstly, it had no visible effect on the microwave and lamp. However, the effect it had on the living matter was astonishing. Eraser, Izuku, and Nizu all watched as a fully grown pot plant ungrew. It went from a full bloom to a mere seedling in seconds, but that wasn't the only effect. The elderly mice in a cage began to become youthful, but it didn't stop there, as the mice went further, becoming FTS, then bios, and finally, they vanished from existence. Lastly, an apple core left by Eraser became uneaten in front of them. Holy Mother, if she can reverse time for organic life. Eraser utters in total disbelief. That's incredible, Eri. Now try and turn it off now. Izuku tells his sister. I can't, it hurts. Eri replies as she desperately tries to turn it off. Eraser then stepped in, activating his erasure, canceling the quirk's power. Are you okay, Eri? Izuku asked as he hugged his sister, and she reciprocated it. I'm sorry I failed, Big Brother Izu. Eri timidly admits. It's okay, Eri. You did your best. Izuku states. That was rather remarkable, little one. I'm very impressed. Nizu announces over the speakers. Nizu, you rat, get down here. You know I hate to raise my voice. Eraser states aggressively. Given what happened to those rats in the cages, I'd rather not. The dean replies. One can only hope. Erase muttered. Anyway, sir, I thinks it's best we keep this test between us four and that you destroy the takes. Izuku states gravely. Agreed, young Midoriya. Given the dangerous nature of younger Midoriya's quirk, I think it best to keep her capabilities an absolute secret. Nizu explains. What about the surveillance and observation tapes of this room? Izuku asked. Snap, what tapes? Haha. Nizu replied as his laughter filled the room. Lunchroom. After learning just how potentially dangerous Eri was, Izuku left her with Eraser and Inko, who they aggressively needed to be in on the secret as her mother, for safety as he went to lunch. He was soon joined by his friends, and they were all curious about Eri and her abilities. But he couldn't tell them anything right now, and be made that point very clear. Following that, they all just enjoyed lunch rushes 5-star cooking together. But unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. A passing blonde douchebag whacked Izuku on the back of the head the corner of his lunch tray. It didn't exactly hurt of anything, but it did cause him to drop some of his katsudon on the floor, and some crimes simply cannot be forgiven. Monome bro, why are you like this? Tetsu asked, annoyed at his classmate's behavior. Oh, sorry, I must have hit his massive ego-stuffed head. Monoma replied with a smug grin, as if waiting for his classmate to bounce off his words. Assaulting a fellow student is a highly reprehensible action. Ida interjected defenses of his friend. It's fine, Ida, it didn't hurt. Besides, I'm used to dealing with people like him. Izuku states as he gets up and looks Monoma in the eye. People like me, you mean superior? Monoma asked condescendingly. No, people who are weak of mind and body. Izuku replied cockily. Now bros, let's not get into any trouble so close to finals. Kirishima states as he and Tetsu get in front of Izuku and Monoma. Midori bro, you're better than this dude. Kirishima states. Monome bro, remember what Bid Sis Kendo said about antagonizing our sister class. Tetsu reminds his classmate. Too late. Kendo states as she interjects. She then gave Monoma the look, which caused the blonde to retreat immediately. Sooty about him. Ever since the USJ, he's been nothing but a pain in my butt. Kendo explains exhaustively. It's fine, Kendo. I only really got in his face because he reminded me of Bakugo, and I've had enough of people like that to last a lifetime. Izuku replies. Yeah, anyway, how are things going for you guys? You excited for finals? Kendo replies as she sits down with 1A. Things are going great, though I haven't seen you in training recently. As for finals, of course we're excited. Izuku replies as they chuckle together. Oh, hey, you didn't hear this from me, but according to some upperclassmen, the first year's finals are robots. Talk about a free win. Kendo states as she rejoins her class. 1A, having heard that, got all excited and confident. Robots were easy enough for them, and so long as they passed the written exam as well, they should pass easily. Izuku, however, was not so sure. With how things have been going, I doubt things will be that easy for us. Izuku thinks TI himself. He then noticed Momo, and remembered something Yagi asked him to do. Oh, by the way, Yamamoto, All Might asked me if I could ask you to meet him in his office after lunch. Izuku tells Momo. Yagi's office. As Momo entered the room, she saw All Might at his desk. Hello, sir. Midoriya told me you wanted to see me? She asked politely. Indeed, young Yaoyorozu, however. Please close the door behind you. All Might states. As she does so, however, the room filled with smoke, which she followed with her eyes only to see All Might shrinking. What on earth is happening? Are you all right, sensei? She asked fearfully, but put on a stoic face. No need to fear, young Yaoyorozu. I am still the same man you were just speaking to, only now I've powered down. I am now Toshinori Yagi. Yagi explains casually to Momo's undisguised bewilderment. I can see you're confused, so please let me explain by telling you a tale of two brothers. Yagi states firmly as Momo took a seat. Mysterious dimension. Meanwhile, somewhere. At last, I have found you, Garou the betrayer. A haunting and thunderous voice bellows into the void. UA, conference room. 'Twas the day before finals, when all through UA the teachers were all pulling their hair out in frustration over two students. Why does this have to be so hard? Mike whined as he laid his head on the conference table. Because one student is an anomaly and the other is crazy. Ectoplasm points out, which they both fit the descriptions. Eraser complains. And here I thought you liked Midoriya, show you to baby. Midnight interjected with a smirk. Ladies, gentlemen, please, now is not the time for this. We can either sit around and argue, or we can do our jobs. Nizu states firmly. I vote to sit around. Mike replies. I vote to argue. Snipe replies. Enough, all of you. We need to determine how we are supposed to test Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. Nizu explains. Sir, with all due respect, for Midoriya, why don't we just throw All Might at him? Midnight suggests. We can't have a one-on-one fight in a test that's supposed to be a two-on-one. Cementos states. Well, then what will you have us do, Cementos? Partner the two of them together. Brilliant idea. Pair the unstable nutcase with the person he hates the most. Midnight replies angrily. The entire staff knew it was a terrible idea. Bakugo had consistently proven to be opposed to teamwork and an abhorrent quirkist. whilst Midoriya was his total opposite as an amazing team player and a free thinker. Unfortunately, however, the decision would be made for them. That's exactly what you'll be doing, Miss Midnight. A voice stated from the doorway. And who are you exactly to barge in on an important meeting and tell us how to do our jobs? Hound Dog asked indignantly as the other teachers glared at the new individual. Because I represent the HPSC and will be the proctor for Mr. Bakugo's test, the man stated as he revealed himself. He was 5.6 feet tall and wore a fully black suit and tie. His hair was short and graying, and his blue eyes looked like a hawk's and darted around the room. That doesn't exactly answer who you are in particular. Nizu points out. My name isn't important, just call me Mr. Q. The man states. Okay then, Mr. Q. What did you mean by your statement earlier, the one about us putting young Midoriya and Bakugo on the same team? Nizu asked as he looked the man up and down. As Miss Midnight so eloquently put it, Mr. Bakugo he his fair share of problems, which are juxtaposed by Mr. Midoriya, right? Then placing them together is an excellent idea. If Mr. Bakugo can overcome his faults to achieve victory, then he'll prove he can re-enter the hero course. And if can't, then he'll prove otherwise. Mr. Q explained. But what if Bakugo's tunnel vision causes him to focus on his perceived rivalry with Midoriya and attack him instead? We can't ignore that possibility. Hound Dog points out. Tough. The HPSC has already signed off on it. Mr. Q states before leaving and leaving the teachers all stunned. They can't do that, right? Can they? Mike asked. I'm afraid they can. The HPSC has the power to overrule me on certain grounds. Nizu explains. DMN. Well, at least we can take comfort in knowing that their opponent knows right and wrong. Midnight states as she looks at the tablet with the student-teacher pairs. Hunter and Bakugo versus All Might. 1A homeroom. The next day, the finals were upon the students. Firstly, they had to hand in all extracurricular essays. They then take an exam for each of their majors. But the big one was the heroics test, which took 2 hours, covered 26 subjects, and had 125 questions to answer. UA, finals testing site. After the grueling written exams, the students were all ushered away to a special testing facility. But when they arrived, they found more than they bargained for, which became increasingly more evident when all the other teachers showed up. Why are all the teachers here? I thought we're just going to fighting robots? Mineta asked fearfully. Figured something like this would happen. Izuku states, causing his classmates to look at him. Green, what are you taking about? Care to fill us in? Jiro asked nervously. I think I'll let the dean explain in my place. You can show yourself, Nizu, I know you're hiding. Izuku replied before speaking to Eraserhead's scarf. Then pop. The dean emerged from the scarf. Drat, I was really looking forward to surprising you all. Nizu states as he looks to Izuku. Young Midoriya, how did you know? He asked whilst leaning on Eraser's head like a wall. I can sense killing intent, remember. Even if you don't plan to kill us, I can still sense that longing for hostility from you, Nizu. Izuku explained with a smile. Sold out by my own SDSM, I'll have to work on that. The dean replied, and at this point people were just confused. Can someone please explain what's going on? Eureka asked as she looked from side to side at her friends. Oh dear, I got distracted. To answer your question, my dear student, the staff of UA have decided to make a few alterations to the final exam of this semester. Nizu explained with a sadistic grin. What kind of alterations, sir? Yamamo asked trepidatiously. Instead of simple-minded robots, this year you students we facing the staff. Nizu explained as all the teachers stepped forward with smiles. The class, sans Izuku, all simultaneously gulped in fear before being led into the observation deck. Testing facilities observation deck. When the class entered, they were met with an eyesore and confusion. The class saw Bakugo, all dressed up in his costume, but not only that, he was accompanied by a strange man in a suit. Students, this is Mr. Q from the HPSC. He's here to proctor young Bakugo to see if he's fit to re-enter the hero course. Nizu explained, and the students all cringed. None of them really wanted the blonde back. Even Kirishima's never-ending optimism was failing him. Yes, all that's all well and good. But can we please get this started, Nizu? I do have other things to do today. Mr. Q explained drearily. Needs must. Nizu replies through clenched teeth as he hopped down from Eraser's shoulder and began typing on the computer. The screen then revealed who would be fighting who. As each team up was revealed, there were many reactions. For some it was joy, others it was fear, Some felt confident, and others felt despair. Though some emotions were modified when Nexu explained that all the teachers would be handicapped with weights. When the last team was revealed, however, there was utter chaos. All Might versus Hunter plus Bakugo. When Izuku saw that, he felt worrisome. Not because he was fighting All Might. No, he was happy to do that to test himself. No, what had him worried was his partner, who was currently glaring a hole into the back of his head. He worried that Bakugo's ego and tunnel vision would lead to disaster. But right now he was focused on something else, the trails of his friends. The first team was called up to enter their respective mock area. First up was Red Rock and Sugarman versus Cementos. Third-person POV. Red Rock and Sugarman versus Cementos was up first, and it wasn't pretty. The two muscleheads had no plan beyond punching through every wall Cementos threw at them. Sato didn't even use his intelligence-boosting sugar for some reason. Izuku was disappointed, seeing as he'd even written down strategic uses of their abilities on the notes he gave them. Round 1 went to the teachers. Froppy and Tsukiyomi versus Ectoplasm was up next, and it went rather well. The two students worked well together, communicated efficiently, and made the most of their abilities. Speaking of which, Tsu showed off some new froggy feats, such as camouflage and paralytic mucus when fighting the clones. There was a slight hiccup when the giant clone reared its ugly mug, but the duo managed to overcome it and claim victory. Round 2 went to the students. Tinya and Tailman versus Power Loader followed next, and it was an odd pairing. The ever-rigid rule follower and the normal type of follower. Their opponents set traps all over the area, making movement dangerous, which for a speedster and a martial artist was a necessity. But in the end, they came up with a decent, if slightly embarrassing solution, which involved Ida giving Ojuro a piggyback ride, and then just Hail Marrying it to success. Round 3 to the students. Creati, Hydro Dancer, and Shoto versus Eraserhead was a weird one, since the teacher had 3 opponents all with versatile and powerful abilities that he could deactivate. Shoto initially tried to take charge and do things his way, but Momo put her foot down and asserted herself as team leader, which Togeki was fine with, and Shoto ignored, leaving them alone. Momo then had Toki use her quirk to create a water ring to act as an early warning system should Eraserhead erase their abilities. As they walk her through the streets, they heard that Shoto had been captured on the system. Pride cometh before the fall and all that, but now they were on edge. They didn't have to wait for long, however, as Eraser was upon them in the moments, using ninja techniques to disarm them. Unfortunately for him, however, they both had some semblance of martial arts abilities, as Toki used what she knew Izuku's martial arts, as did Momo. The two students surrounded the teacher on both sides to ensure at least one of them have access to their quirk at any one time. In the end, Eraser was overwhelmed and outwitted by a combination of strategy, flashbangs, water WHPS, white phosphorus, martial arts, and a super punch to the face courtesy of Momo's lighting-wrapped fist, which sent him flying further than it had any right to. Round 4, victory for 2/3 of the students. Uravity and Shine Knight versus 13 came next, and it was clear why the duo had been paired. It was to maximize their weaknesses, specifically the nausea their quirks caused, but things had changed. Ururika had added a selection of anti-nausea medication as well as ginger beer to her arsenal to counteract her symptoms, thanks to Izuku's notes, and she gladly shared with Aoyama. With their biggest weakness overcome, next up was actually beating the hero could use their suction and disintegration capabilities to end any ranged attacks, and CQC was too dangerous. Luckily, Ururika hung out with Izuku all the time and picked up a few tricks. She had Aoyama lay down suppressing fire, not to injure 13, but to distract them. She then used anchored cover to position herself to 13's left before firing her grappling hooks behind 13's cone of effect, thus binding their arms and throwing them off balance. She then gave Aoyama a signal to blast 13 with all his might. Round 5 to the students. Queen Amino and Charge Bolt versus Nizu was an absolute catastrophe. Neither student was skilled enough or smart enough to outwit the dean, leading to them being treated like rats in a maze, of which there was only one exit. The whole thing ended with demoralized surrender. Round 6 went to the teachers. Anima and Punk Rock versus Present Mike was one many thought would be a lose for the duo, but Jiro and Kuda managed to make a decent pair. Initially, they were pinned by Mix's vehement vocals, which took Jiro out the fight due to her sensitivity to noise, leaving the cowardly Kuda on his own to think up a winning strategy, and oh boy did he. The quiet young man pulled himself together, and instead of screaming his lungs out to get help from birds, he whispered to the grubs and gribblies in the ground. Mike then found his legs covered up to the knees in ants, spiders, centipedes, and all manner of exoskeletal enemies. His resulting panic gave the duo enough time to escape the exam area. Round 7, to the students. Tentacle and Aurora Girl vs. Snipe was rather routine in comparison. Snipe had the two heroes playing defense, seeing as neither had anything to counter his long-range capabilities. However, Snipe's homing quirk only worked on things he could see, which led to Toru simply turning her new costume invisible and, using the stealth technique Izuku taught her, to sneak up on the cowboy and slapping some cuffs on him. Unfortunately, due to this act startling Snipe, he kinda accidentally palmed her melons, which got him a swift kick to the crotch in retaliation. Round 8, Anther student win. Grape Juice and Cellophane vs. Midnight was second to last on the list, and it was interesting, to say the least. Midnight was assigned to counter the duo for two different reasons: to exploit Mineta's perverted nature and force Zero to think outside the box with his tape. Surprisingly enough, though, only one of weaknesses ended up being relevant, as Zero was quickly defeated and Mineta actually ran instead of trying to feel up Midnight. Round 9, the students, surprisingly. But after all that, there was still one more test to come. As the students all looked at the monitor for the test between Izuku and Bakugo against All Might. All Might versus Hunter plus Bakugo. All Might had dashed off to hide in the mock city in a fruitless attempt at getting Bakugo to listen to him. Izuku was trying to not lose his patience with the blonde, who kept yelling at him for no reason. "Quit following me, DKU, you stalker," Bakugi shouted as they walked down a street with no alleys. "However much you hate this situation, Bakugo, it doesn't detract from the fact that we're meant to work together," Izuku replied calmly before dodging a swing fist. "I don't need help from some quirkless freak like you. Now leave so I can do this on my own," Bakugo replied venomously. "You really think you can defeat All Might on your own? God, you really are delusional," Izuku states, only angering the blonde more. "What was that, you useless F? Delusional? You mean like you and how you think you can be a hero without a quirk?" Bakugo screamed as veins began to bulge on his face. "Are you so blinded by your prejudices that you can't see what's 2 feet in front of you? I can be a hero without a quirk, because a quirk, much those bracers of yours, are nothing but a tool that only works in the right hands. I don't need a quirk to be a hero, much in the way Hero doesn't need a quirk to be a good person," Izuku explained, which immediately set his partner off. "I'll kill you," Bakugo screamed before jumping at Izuku, only to immediately be restrained. "Nizu, this is Hunter. It appears my partner has gone rogue. Permission to subdue and restrain?" Izuku asks over the comms the students had been given to use in their tests. Whilst the comms were meant to be used solely in test conditions, they could link to the observation deck in the event on an emergency for safety purposes. "F you, Deku. I ain't your F partner. Now let me go and take a swan dive off a F roof, you quirkless waste, and hope to get a quirk in the next life, so you can actually be worth something," Bakugo screamed in unmitigated fury as his filter completely disappeared. Unknown to him, however, Izuku's column link was still open, and the entire staff just heard what he'd just said. But before anything could be done about it, whoosh! A truly enormous shockwave rocked the surrounding area, throwing up cars, shattering windows, and giving Bakugo an opportunity to escape. "Haha, you two were taking too long, so I decided to invite myself to your little party," All Might announced boisterously. "Shut the F up, All Might, this ain't no goddamn party. I'm going to finally prove that I, Katsuki Bakugo, am the best by beating you." Bakugi screamed in retort and blasted towards me, the hero, at full speed, fully prepared to face the hero as a superior. Crash! Only to get immediately and unceremoniously Detroit smashed into the side of a building by a casual attack from All Might. Well, I expected a bit more from him. Oh well, All Might states as he turns his attention towards Izuku. "Hey All Might, so gonna be honest with you, I was initially planning on just fighting you. However, Bakugo said some things that really set me off, and seeing as he's well indisposed, I'm going to have to let out my anger on you instead. Sorry in advance." Izuku explained as he took his classic water stream rock smashing fist stance. The two men then stared each other down as if daring the other make the first move. Then without warning they simultaneously launched themselves at each other, and their fists collided. Shirakakuom. Testing facilities observation deck. Meanwhile, back in the observation deck, the staff and the students were mortified. They'd just gotten that communication from Izuku asking to restrain Bakugo due to the blonde's attempt at assault. Nizu was about to reply until they heard something else on the communicator. F you Deku. I ain't your F partner. Now let me go and take a swan dive off a F roof you quirkless waste and hope to get a quirk in the next life so you can actually be worth something. They heard Bakugo scream. His words reverberated around the echoing room. The room fell silent in utter horror. Did he really just say that? Had Bakugo just told some time to kill themselves? What could have possibly motivated him to say such an abhorrent thing? The class and staff were all so stunned that they couldn't even appreciate how Izuku was fighting on par with All Might. The proctor, however, was having a different reaction. F fuckity fing F. Why the hell did you say that, you utter moron? Mr. Q thought to himself after hearing Bakugo's words. But it wasn't just what Bakugo said that angered him, but Izuku's actions as well. He'd been told by the HPSC to get rid of the quirkless boy for what he'd said and done over the last few weeks. Insulting them at the sports festival, making their heroes look foolish by defeating Stain, and now here he was matching All Might of all people in direct combat. He had come up with a plan to remove the boy legitimately by pairing him with Bakugo and hoping their egos would clash and lead to a fight he could pin on Midoriya, but now that was impossible. The stupid blonde had gone and told Midoriya to kill himself. That was not something a hero should ever say, under any circumstances. He'd told Bakugo to trigger his partner, and he'd been assured that Midoriya was a jealous and vindictive person. My Bakugo. Why the hell did he listen to Blonde and not do his own research? Hugh was indescribably furious at what Bakugo had said to Midoriya, since it not only completely ruins his chances at even staying in Gen Ed, but now the young man would be expelled, and they'd lose an insider spy and lose the chance to rid themselves of a threat to the status quo they'd worked to preserve for over 80 years. Hugh's attention was then drawn back to the screen as he watched Midoriya, a quirkless young man, match the strongest hero in history. I am so fired. Hugh thought to himself, lamenting his failure as he watched Midoriya do the impossible. Back to the fight. Izuku and All Might were throwing their full weight at each other. Well, almost all of it. All Might still had the weight limiters restricting his strength and speed, but if Izuku wanted to evolve further, he needed a real challenge. After all, the true nature of evolution is competition. Izuku began targeting All Might's wrists and ankles to break the weights in order to force the hero to use his full power. Thankfully, despite All Might's decades of experience, he was still a complete amateur when it came to martial arts. In moments, the weights were broken and discarded. You aimed for the weights? Why? All Might asked, forcing a lull in the fight. You see, All Might, if I am to truly grow stronger, then I need to evolve, and the nature of evolution is competition. So now, without those weights holding you back, I can experience your full strength as your body can allow it. Izuku explained as he reoriented himself. Many a cocky villain have said similar things, young Midoriya, and all fell before my mighty fists. Now, let's see if you'll be any different. All Might replied before moving faster than Izuku was expecting and attacking. Detroit Smash. He yelled as he punched Izuku's head into the pavement below. But then, something unexpected happened. Izuku immediately took advantage of the kinetic energy and used it to fling his legs up to All Might's neck, wrapping them around before flipping the hero and burying his iconic smile onto the concrete. Izuku then backflipped out the crater and used a newly acquired technique. Luna Arc. He cried out before slamming his leg down on All Might's back and widening the crater. Said crater then exploded as All Might recovered. That was young Maruko's technique. How? All Might asked. Simple. I have access to far more than just my own techniques. In fact, you probably recognize this one. Izuku replied as he took a stance that All Might recognized, because he used to practice them in the mirror. Smash Impact. Izuku yelled as he replicated All Might's smash technique. Except something was different. Kaboom! The attack was far more concentrated, resembling a railgun more than a bomb. The attack slammed into All Might harder than any attack had ever hit him before, with the only exception being the hit that disemboweled him and shot him through a building. Incredible, you replicated my iconic smash style. All Might complimented as he recovered from the attack. Not just replicate, but improved upon. I've been studying heroes for years, All Might, you most of all, and I've fully broken down your techniques and made alterations to them to fit my own style. Izuku replied with a smile as he took pride in what he had accomplished. He then pulled out another modified technique. Smash Slicer. Izuku announced as he released the attack in a karate chop lotion as All Might just about dodged it, only for the condensed air to cleave through a nearby building, slicing off one of its corners. Holy cow, that's so cool. All Might reacted as he watched his student surpass him so quickly. I know. So we gonna keep going, or are you gaining to surrender? Izuku replied. Surrender? Haha. I'll never surrender, hero, no. You must defeat me. All Might replied with his iconic laugh. Izuku just smiled in response, and the two combatants resumed their fight. The two of them slammed into one another, and the battle escalated continuously. They threw each other through buildings, slammed each other around like ragdolls. Izuku used a street lamp like a baseball bat at one point, and All Might used mock cars as boxing gloves. The two of them were also smiling the entire time. Neither had ever really had many opportunities to fully unleash their full potential on an opponent when sparring, usually reserving their upper limits for real fights. But now, they could have fun and enjoy a battle. Meanwhile, Bakugo was just now recovering from his instant defeat at All Might's hands and was enraged. He'd been batted aside like he wasn't worth the effort, like he wasn't even a threat that BSDRD got him with a sucker punch. As he emerged from the rubble he'd been buried in, he looked out upon the mock city and was enraged. Deku was fighting All Might on even footing somehow. This shouldn't be possible. He doesn't even have a quirk, and yet he's somehow actually fighting All Might? How? I'm the one who's supposed to beat All Might, not the worthless nerd. Bakugo rationalized as he blasted towards the fighting duo with little plan beyond blowing them both up. But try as he might, he just couldn't keep up. Every time he thought he hit one of them, it turned out to be a mere afterimage. Every time he flew after them, he was left in dust, and every time he tried to get between them, he was ignored. At this point, Bakugo was losing mind. How was he supposed to be the next #1 hero if he couldn't even keep up with a pathetic Deku or overcome All Might? It was infuriating. Back with the other two. The fight between Izuku and All Might was rapidly reaching its crescendo. Every time All Might increased in speed, Izuku adapted. Every time he landed a punch, Izuku adapted. Every time he tried to counter, Izuku yet again adapted. Over and over and over still. The symbol of peace was finding himself at a disadvantage. Izuku took advantage of his new control over the battle and landed a direct smash impact uppercut on All Might, launching him into the air higher than the mock skyscrapers, before jumping after him. As All Might regained his bearings, he looked up. He saw his student, looking above him, and felt proud. As Izuku prepared his final attack, All Might simply accepted it. He knew that Nana would also be proud of Izuku for his accomplishments. God, he'd been such a fool when offering him OFA because Izuku just didn't need it. Whirling wind, water stream, roaring aura, sky-ripping fist. Izuku shouted as he used downward momentum to launch All Might through the mock skyscraper from its roof to its bottom floor. Through. Crash. Every. Crash. Layer. Crash. When All Might hit the ground after crashing through 100 or so floors, he found itself in a crater, buried in pulverized concrete, as the rest of the building collapsed on top of him. God, he was proud of his student for surpassing him. All Might POV. As All Might lay there in the building's rubble, however, he heard a voice of someone close to his heart. Toshi, I'm proud of you. A woman's voice he recognized said, causing him to open his eyes and see her. Nana? He asked weakly as he tried to look at his old MSDRS face, but it was too dark to see anything. If you just had a little bit more power, you could have easily won the battle. The woman said, which caused Yagi to realize something was wrong. Thanks to all my training in the mindscape, I've gained a new ability to give you more power. The woman, claiming to be Nana, explains as she reached out her hand. Come, take my hand, and take the power from me, so that you may strike down all your enemies. She states, holding out her hand. Now Yagi knew something was wrong. Nana never spoke like this. She wasn't battle-crazed or vengeful. She was kind and caring. Who are you? Yagi asked angrily as the fake rose its head. Disappointing, it said before vanishing into thin air. He blinked and rubbed his eyes to try and make sense of what he'd just seen, but chalked it up to getting hit too hard on the head. Hey, All Might, you comfy down there? Izuku asked on the fringe of the crater. Haha, yes actually, surprisingly enough. I feel like a young bamboo shoot, just waiting to grow up all big and strong. He boisterously replied with a smile. Cool. You want to keep going, or are you down for the day? Izuku replied, bringing up a valid point. No, I'm done for today. You completely drained my time limit, young Midoriya. This I concede defeat. He replied happily. Alright, let's get you out then. Izuku states as he slides down the crater to help his teacher up. OHNOUF, don't Deku. A familiar voice shouted from the crater's edge. The two of them looked up to see Bakugo with a face of unbridled rage plastered on it. Young Bakugo, you're late. I just conceded defeat to your teammate. Congratulations, you've passed. All Might explained happily, only pissing off the blonde more. You conceded to F Deku. Bakugo shouted as he aimed his grenade bracer at the two of them. Both of you can die in hell. Bakugo shouted as he unleashed the gauntlet blast only for Izuku to easily reflect it with no issue. Testing facilities observation deck. Once All Might was dug out of the rubble and Bakugo was carted off to the infirmary, the class celebrated Izuku's victory over All Might. The proctor, Mr. Q, however, just left in anger. He'd wanted to try and make a case against Izuku for blasting Bakugo with the blonde's attack, but he knew it wouldn't fly with how obvious the footage was. This isn't over, you quirkless reject, Mr. Q thought to himself as he left. Aftermath. After everyone has changed back into their uniforms, they were dismissed for the day, but seeing as they just finished their finals, the entire class decided to celebrate. They even dragged Todoroki along. They all went out to McDonald's to congratulate themselves for a victory and to mercilessly tease those who failed. They laughed, they cried with comical tears, and they most importantly enjoyed themselves. Eventually, the subject shifted to the camping trip that was coming up after their finals, and they all had a blast talking about what they'd be potentially doing. Meanwhile, Izuku was just happy. He was on his way to becoming the first quirkless hero, had real friends, a loving family, and was just happy for once. Hey God, if you're up there listening, thanks for reincarnating me into this world. Izuku thought as he thanked God for his mercy when he was Garou. He was then pulled into a conversation by Kirishima, and they all continued to have fun together. Bakugo POV. Meanwhile, across town, Bakugo was not having fun, quite the opposite in fact. He'd just been expelled from UA due to inappropriate behavior during the final exam, and his proctor had chewed him out. He hadn't even bothered to go home because he couldn't be asked to deal with his stupid parents right now because he knew how they'd react to his expulsion. It's not fair, he screamed as he blasted some dumpsters in rage. They can't expel me because I told that waste of life to off himself. How can they not see that I'm destined for greatness? He shouted indignantly as he genuinely couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. You're right, it is unfair. A voice from a nearby alleyway said. Who the FS there? Bakugo yelled as he pointed his hands down the alley. A friend with the connections to help repressed people like yourself. The voice replied as a woman with blue skin and purple hair exited the alley. F you going on about, freak? Bakugo asked cruelly. The name's Curious Blondie, and you'd better remember it, or I'll table my offer to help you. Curious replied viciously. All right then, Curious, talk. Bakugo replied. I represent an organization of like-minded individuals, like yourself, and they've asked me to ask you for aid. She explains vaguely. What do you mean by like-minded people? Bakugo asked. The repressed and the powerful. You see, you're not the only person with a powerful quirk who's been scorned for doing nothing but exercising your right, use it, as all strong people should. She explained, and Bakugo smiled. They'd been monitoring UA's students for years and had initially planned to have the blonde spy on the university, but now the plan had changed. Go on, he states. The organization I represent is currently working to throw off the binge that restrained the strong like you and I. The binge that forces the strong to protect the weaklings that by right we should be crushing beneath our boots. Curious explained charismatically as her words hooked on another soldier for the army. That's all well and good, but what's in it for me? Bakugo asks. Revenge on a certain quirkless waste of life that's been getting in your way instead of just dying and ceasing to blight the world with his existence. And after our success, you can take any title you want, like, say, #1 hero. Curious replies, knowing she got him thanks to a certain proctor that worked for them inside the HPSC. There was a pause after she said that. What do you need from me? Bakugo asked with a ferocious and determined look. Brilliant. Now for the assignment. You've heard of the League of Villains? She replied. The losers who attacked us at the USJ? Yeah, I've heard of them. He replied. My organization needs someone on the inside, and that someone will be you. Your cover story is already perfect. You were unjustly expelled from UA, and now you're out for revenge. Those guys will take you up on that easily. She explained. I'm in, but I've got conditions. Bakugo replied. Name them. Curious stated. First off, I killed Deku, no one else, just me. And second, when this whole thing is said and done, I want a seat at the table. Bakugo demanded. I'm sure my organization can accommodate you on those conditions. Curious capitulated. That's another thing. You keep saying organization. Who do you actually work for? Bakugo pointed out. How rude of me. You see our name, it's very popular with the masses. Apologies for the late introduction. We are called the Meta Liberation Army. Curious states, and Bakugo smiles. Curious then gives Bakugo a personal communicator as well as other methods of contacting her, and the current no location of the League. The two then patterned ways. As Bakugo left, however, the back of his neck felt itchy and rough, but he ignored it. Camera pan to the back of his neck. We see blackened scales beginning to grow, and his scratching revealed more. So, this was the end of part 5 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.